Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Samantha Vergara, and I'm with the City of Milpitas. I will be your moderator for the class tonight. And if you had just joined, I had opened up a poll just to gauge where we are as an audience. So if you can fill that out, that would be awesome. And today we will be having a class on the beauty and benefits of rain gardens. And this is a class in partnership with BOSCA, or the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. So before we get started tonight, let's go over a few guidelines for participating in the class. First, all attendees are going to be muted by default. This is so that we can reduce the amount of background noise during the presentation. And we will be stopping periodically to address questions during the presentation. And we highly encourage you to ask any questions that might come up. And there are two different ways that you can ask questions during the class. So during the presentation, we ask that you submit your questions through the Q&A, and either I or Chris will read the question out loud, and then we can go ahead and answer them. And then at the end of the presentation, we will be having a Q&A session. So you can continue to submit your questions through the Q&A feature, or you can use the raise hand feature, and then we'll call on you to unmute if you'd prefer to speak and ask your questions that way. Also during the Q&A session, I will be sharing links to resources that are shared during the presentation, and those links will be shared with you in a follow-up email. And this session tonight is going to be recorded, and I will send a link to the recording to you in a follow-up email within the next couple of days. Next slide, please. So let's get started with a quick introduction of BOSCA. Like I said, BOSCA stands for the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. They're a special district that represents 26 agencies that include cities, water districts, private water companies, and a university, all of whom purchase water from the San Francisco Regional Water System. And BOSCA member agencies provide water to over 1.8 million people and over 40,000 businesses and organizations located in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda County. And BOSCA's main goal is to provide high quality supply of water to its agencies and their residents at a fair price. Next slide. In order to meet that goal, BOSCA has provided a regional water conservation program to support their agencies in improving water use efficiency. And while we have made lots of improvements in water efficiency over the past decade, there's still a lot more that we can do, specifically looking towards outdoor irrigation and landscape areas. Outdoor water use is the largest potential source of untapped savings. And we encourage reducing water use outdoors through the implementation of water efficient plants and efficient irrigation techniques. Next slide, please. And if this is something that you are interested in, there are lots of rebates and programs that you can take advantage of. For example, if you're located within the BOSCA region, they have many different rebates that you can apply for, such as the Lawn Be Gone turf removal and lawn conversion rebate program. They also offer rebates for installing rain barrel systems. Next slide, please. There are also incentives for installing a smart irrigation controller, as well as implementing a rain garden in your yard. Next slide. If you're located in Milpitas, we also have a couple of special rebates and programs available as well. We partner with Valley Water through their landscape rebate program, and we offer incentives for projects such as removing turf and installing drought-tolerant plants and landscape materials such as mulch. We also provide rebates for installing rain barrels and putting in rain gardens. There's also rebates available for implementing a laundry to landscape gray water system, which you can use to divert water from your laundry over to your landscape. There are also a couple of other free programs through Valley Water as well, such as the residential and commercial irrigation surveys and the free water conservation devices, which are available on their online shopping cart. Next slide, please. And here are a few additional ways to save water in Milpitas. The first being to sign up for the free WaterSmart customer portal. This is a really great tool for tracking your water use and investigating high water bills or any signs of high consumption. And another way that you can help us save water is to report water waste when you see it. So this would be, for example, using broken sprinklers, seeing sprinklers that are causing runoff, or seeing any irrigation that's happening in the middle of the day. And you can report water waste through the My Milpitas app or by calling the Water Conservation Hotline. And the number is up there. Next slide, please. And if you are located closer to the South Bay, or if you're in Santa Clara County, again, you can apply for their landscape rebate program, and they have very similar offerings to what is available in Milpitas and through Bosca. Next slide, please. And here are some additional resources if you're looking for some inspiration for a landscape project or trying to figure out what you can do to save water outdoors. Again, here's some more contact information for Valley Water. And if you enjoyed tonight's program, we do have a couple more webinars that are upcoming. You can find full details and register for the upcoming classes on Bosca's website, which is bayareaconservation.org. Next slide, please. And again, this is another great resource for finding more information about sustainable landscaping. This is bayareagardening.org. And with that, I am pleased to introduce our instructor, Chris Corvetti. Chris moved to California as a member of the Watershed Stewards AmeriCorps program, where she delved into issues surrounding water conservation specific to the Bay Area. Since the end of her AmeriCorps service in 2017, Chris has worked with numerous local nonprofits and municipalities to install rainwater harvesting systems throughout the Bay Area. Now I will hand off to Chris to get us started.
Thank you, Samantha. Hey, everybody, welcome. We're gonna talk a little bit about rain gardens, but before we get to rain gardens, I want to talk a little bit about rainwater harvesting in general and why rainwater harvesting is so important. So this is a little diagram of what happens when it rains. So the water comes down, it hits our roofs, it hits our landscaping, it hits our driveways, and all of the hardscaped areas in our neighborhoods, those roads and parking lots and everything else that is hardscaped. And when it hits the hardscaped areas, it can't soak into the ground. So it runs off into the streets and into our storm drains. We also have a really interesting types of soils in the Bay Area that get a little bit of a shock effect. So for the first rain, they are in so much shock from suddenly having water again after being so dry that they can't absorb that water. And so we also get runoff even on the areas that aren't hardscaped, that are just so dry they can't absorb that first bit of rain. So we get a lot of runoff that can carry stormwater pollution, pollutants into our waterways, and they go into our storm drains. So I've done a lot of these presentations live, and I always ask people, where do our storm drains go? And I get some very different answers. So our storm drains are actually very different than our sewer system. Our storm drains, all those drains that you see on the side of the roads and by sidewalks and in city landscaped areas, those all go into our local creeks directly. Those are not filtered, those are not treated, they go straight into the local creeks. Anything that goes to our sewer system, to the water treatment plant, those are our household waste, things that come from our sinks, our showers, our toilets. All of that goes into the sewer system. It goes to the wastewater treatment plant. It gets cleaned up and then it goes out clean. But our storm drains don't get cleaned. So it'd be great if we could reduce the amount of polluted runoff that goes into the storm drains. And there's a wonderful way to do that, which is called slow it, spread it, and sink it. The idea with this is slowing that water down during that first rainfall. So when the ground that normally can absorb water is too shocked to absorb water, if you slow that water down and spread it out, it gives the ground and that soil time to adjust and be able to sink that water into the ground. And that would then reduce the amount of runoff going into our storm drains and thus reduce the number of pollutants that runoff could carry. So there's a couple different ways that rainwater harvesting can work to slow it, spread it, and sink it. And we're going to be focusing on rain gardens today, but I just wanted to do a quick shout out for these other systems. I'm sure you guys have all heard about rain barrels. Rain barrels are a form of rainwater harvesting where you hold that water in a tank and store it and then sink it into the ground after the storm event. Cisterns are rain barrels that are 200 gallons or larger. We're going to learn a lot about rain gardens today. And the other one that a lot of cities in the Bay Area are starting to use for their sidewalks and sometimes for parking spaces is permeable pavement. And permeable pavement is great because it takes what would traditionally be a hardscaped area and allows water to even soak into the ground there. This picture is porous cement where the water is able to go right through. A lot of people for their driveways can do permeable pavement by just having gaps in the paving slabs where water can soak into the ground in between. So there are some cool options there. So all of these systems have very similar benefits in that they're going to capture and filter the runoff from impervious surface and allow local groundwater recharge. They're going to slow that water down, spread it out, and sink it into the ground, which is going to reduce that polluted runoff. All of these systems are going to help reduce flooding right around your house because you're hooking up to your gutter system and your downspout. So you're going to move that water a little bit farther away from your house. And rain gardens specifically can reduce irrigation, especially if you're using native plants, because they're already synced to our California rain cycle. So they're going to be okay being a little bit drier in the summer. They're going to be happy getting a little bit of flooding in the winter, and they're going to work well with our native habitat. Provide native habitat for our native insects and birds. So there are a lot of ways to take a rain garden and really make it Bay Area specific and really wonderful for our local ecosystem and to replenish areas that some of our native birds and insects have lost out on habitat and give them a little habitat for the butterflies and the birds. They're also going to reduce flooding, sewer overflows, and erosion around your home. We're going to talk a little bit later about how rain gardens specifically will do that by moving the water farther away from the home as you sink it into the ground. And this is a great way to enhance your landscape while serving as a water-wise educational tool for community members. And just, they can be really, really beautiful. The picture on the left is a native rain garden at Bull Park in Palo Alto. It is not connected to a building. We do not have a downspout or gutter running into it. This is a question I often receive is, does a rain garden have to be connected to a house? In most cases, if you're going to be installing this at your own house, you will be connecting this to a gutter system, but there are places where there's flooding. So previously, this bike path on the left of the picture would flood every time it rained. And this landscape was set up kind of as a hill, and it was all grass. So what we did was we took we dug out an area and we kind of made a little bit of a sinuous dig out here. And we came all the way around the storm drain that's at the bottom of the picture. And we dug out this whole area to be able to create a rain garden. So you can see the storm drain here in the bottom. That storm drain was totally covered and non-functioning, which is part of the reason we had the flooding. We dug down about 16 to 18 inches to create an area so that storm drain now doesn't actually need to be used unless we have a really heavy storm, because the garden's able to absorb all the extra water without it flowing into the storm drain. So this is an example where you don't need a building to connect your rain garden, because we had enough of a source of runoff water to be able to fill that garden. We're going to look at some examples that do use houses as well, or other buildings, and we're going to look at the anatomy of a rain garden and really what makes a rain garden different from your average garden around your house. So rain gardens are specifically designed to capture, store, and infiltrate the rainwater. They allow more water to soak into the ground because of the way that they're engineered. Generally, part of this engineering process is removing the native soil and either amending it or replacing it altogether. So you're gonna be digging to put in a rain garden. Native plants, like we talked about, they require less maintenance than a traditional garden, and they help with native insects and bugs and butterflies and birds, as well as other native critters that'll move in. They are designed to pond temporarily, but they're not a pond feature. So even though rain garden makes you think of something that's really wet all the time, they're actually dry most of the time, because California is dry most of the time. So these are designed to fit into our natural system, and they pond up during the rain, and then they allow the water to soak in. This picture on the left has the waters coming down this pipe here. It goes underground to our barrel and then back up and into the barrel here. The overflow from this barrel comes into our rain garden and fills the rain garden. So in this case, we are combining both a rain cistern, it's a 200-gallon tank, with a rain garden, so that it doesn't capture, the rain garden does not capture all the water from the roof. The first 200 gallons from the roof get stored in the tank to irrigate the rain garden in between storms, and then any overflow goes right into that garden to pond. So if you do have questions as I'm moving forward, feel free to type them into the Q&A and I'll answer them. Otherwise, we'll do the question section at the end. So the next question I often get, since we're in the Bay Area, is there enough rain? And the short answer is yes. But, who wants to just hear yes? Let's look at the numbers. So 1,000 square foot roof can capture over 600 gallons of rainwater from 1 inch of rain. Well, Chris, how do I know this? I know this because there's a mathematical equation to help me figure that out. So if we look at Milpitas, we get about 17 inches of rain a year, which is over 10,000 gallons of potential harvesting for rainwater in a year for 1,000 square foot roof. An average storm event is more like half an inch. I'm not talking about those big storms we had last year where we suddenly had 7 inches in like 3 days. But our average rain events historically, and I know going forward, who knows what the weather's going to do, but historically, we get about half inch at a time. And for 1,000 square foot roof, that's 300 gallons that you could potentially harvest. If you are just thinking, I just want to dip my toes into this and see what it's like, I want to use the rebates, which we're going to talk about, and I just want to get a really small garden area and see how it does, you can design a smaller area. But if you want to do your best potential, you can use these recommendations from Valley Water for your garden size square foot based on your roof area. So these are their recommendations. Your garden doesn't need to be this size, but you do want to think about soil type as you're planning your size of your garden. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. When you're measuring your roof, when we're talking about your roof area for this harvesting potential equation, you want to look at only the area of roof you're actually using. So in this case, you can see there are 2 downspouts in this front left part of the house that we are harvesting from to go into the same rain garden. So because we're harvesting from both of that, we have this whole roof area here. And that is what we're going to measure. If we were, however, deciding to only harvest from this downspout, we would not measure that whole roof. We would split it in half on that part of the roof, and we would measure here to get our roof area. So you're only measuring the roof area that is going to the downspout that you're connecting into your rain garden. Most roof types that we have in the Bay Area are totally great for rainwater harvesting. A couple roof types that you want to avoid are galvanized or untreated metal roofs, because you'll end up with more metals in your soil than you want from the rust forming on that roof. You also want to be aware that some shake roofs are treated with an herbicide or a pesticide. If you are treating your own roof because someone's going up there once a year to spray it, and you probably know if you're paying someone to do that. So if you are doing that regularly, you don't want to funnel all of those herbicides and pesticides into one location, because then you'll get an accumulative effect and it will kill all your lovely plants that you're planting. If you are not treating your wood, cedar, or shake shingle roof regularly, then that roof should be fine. The natural cedar oil in the roof, the amount that actually seeps into the water is usually fairly negligible and won't affect your plants, but you can also look at plants that are happier around cedar with that cedar oil. So you can, depending on if you do have that roof type, you can think about which plants will be happier with that water, with a little bit of oil that comes from it. So let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a rain garden, and then I'm going to talk about testing your soil and figuring out what your infiltration rate is. So a traditional rain garden kind of looks like this. You're going to dig out anywhere from about 12 to 24 inches deep. But what you're going to have is your minimum depth of each layer, and you would adjust to get 12 inches between the 3, but our minimum depth of each layer is going to be about 3 inches. I like to put a little bit thicker bioswale soil in so that my plant roots have a little bit more time to get down and in between the drainage rock. So I usually do more about 5 inches of the bioswale soil with 3 or 4 of the drainage rock and 3 or 4 of the river rock to get my 12 inches, but a minimum of 3 inches for each level. So once you dig this out, the first thing you're going to put back in is drainage rock. So this is about 3/4 inch to 1 inch size gravel that you're going to fill it in with. And the reason we do this is because that gravel will allow water to sit in between all the different stones, and it will have an area where the water can just sit down there in the ground while the soil has time to be ready to absorb it. So that water can kind of pond underground, and then that soil can slowly take it in. In the middle layer, we have our bioswale soil. Bioswale soil can either be a amended soil using your natural soil and adding sand and compost, or you can buy a bioswale mix to put in. Depending on what type of natural soil you have, it's, if you already have kind of a silty soil, adding some compost in, you might be able to get a pretty good bioswale soil yourself. if you have a pretty clayey soil, you may want to purchase more amendment for that. At the top, I usually use river rocks. Some people use mulch. The issue I've had with mulch is that it floats. Even if you use a hardwood mulch, it can sometimes get swept a little bit out of your rain garden during that temporary ponding. River rocks don't float. They sit there. They hold all the bioswale soil in place. I've had really good luck with the river rocks. I also like the way the river rocks look on the top. Even when they're dry, they give that dry creek bed effect, and I find that attractive. I do use mulch on my berms, so around the outside of those river rocks, I use mulch that helps keep moisture in the soil, and it helps the plants that are on the edge of the water stay a little bit more damp even in the dry season. So let's take a look at soil types. And if you guys have any questions about the anatomy, feel free to type them in. We are going to talk a little bit more, and I have some more diagrams coming up for that. So our infiltration rate is the water depth divided by the elapsed time. So pretty simple equation to work at. We want to look at about at least 6 inches deep. So we're not just digging down, 1 inch and saying, oh, that water disappeared fast. We want to actually dig a hole at least 4-inch by 4-inch wide and at least 6 inches deep with a relatively flat bottom. You can put something across the top of the hole and then put your measuring stick in the middle and measure to that top, whatever piece of wood you put across the top of the hole. And you want to fill that hole up with water and keep track of how long it takes for that water to go down. So if it's going really fast, that might be minutes, it might be an hour. If you look at it and you're like, well, that water is not going anywhere, come back in, half an hour, come back in an hour, and check regularly. You want to keep track of soil type as well. So it's going to affect your infiltration rate, but it'll also affect whether or not you want to put in a rain garden. Because if you have really clay soil, you may not want to do a rain garden. So one of the things that you can do is a ribbon soil test. You're going to take about 2 teaspoons of soil from that bottom of that 6-inch hole that you dug for your infiltration rate test. And you're going to knead that soil in the palm of your hand and add a couple drops of water until it kind of makes a putty texture. Then you'll make it into a ball and push it between the side of your forefinger and your thumb, kind of squeezing it out to see if you can make it stand up and make a ribbon out of it. And this little graph shows you how long the ribbon will get. If you can get a ribbon more than 2 inches, your soil has so much clay in it, you probably don't want to do a rain garden, because that you would have to do a very large rain garden to be able to avoid the ponding lasting for too long. So you do want to make sure that your soil is going to work for this. I know we do have some pretty clayey soil in the Bay Area, especially as you get closer to the Bay, but most of those, the clay gets really bad more than 2 feet down, and you'll still get a pretty good infiltration rate for your rain garden. So one of the questions that came up is, can you walk on the rain garden? And the answer is yes. If you're doing river rocks, I always recommend putting like a stepping stone in the middle so you would cross it like a dry creek bed. I walk through my river rocks on my garden in front all the time, but they're not, it's a bunch of large boulders, not large cobbles. So it's not the easiest thing to walk on. If you're installing mulch, you can always walk on the mulch. One of the things with the rain garden is you don't want to walk and compact it a lot when you're first installing it until you have all those layers installed, because you don't want to overly compact all of your gravel and all of your soil. You want to have a little bit of room for that water to fill in. So you may find that your rain garden ends up, sinking a little bit as you finish, and you can fill that in with more cobbles at the end. So when you're thinking about doing a rain garden, you need to be at least 10 feet away from your foundation, preferably downhill. So we really don't want to put this uphill from our home because water runs downhill. But you could do it level with your house or marginally downhill from the home. At least 5 feet away from your property line. So what we're already looking at is you need at least 18 feet from your house to your property line, right? 10 feet for the start of the garden away from the house, 3 feet minimum width for the garden, and then 5 feet to the property line. So we don't want to have all of our extra water going into our neighbor's property or out into the city property. No matter how much you hate your neighbor, you can't flood them out. So we're going to make sure all that water ends up on our own property. This is a legal requirement in the state of California. All your water needs to end up on your own property from a rain garden. Check for buried utilities. So call 811. You want to make sure that you are not right on top of any of your utilities. You definitely don't want to build over a septic system because this water could leach down into your septic system and back it up. You want to avoid large tree roots. So you don't want to end up having to cut large tree roots or hurt a big tree to put this in. And if your property is sloped, like significantly sloped, you can use that excavated soil to create a significant berm on the downhill side to give you that height that you need for your rain garden. So let's talk a little bit more about these things. We've already covered a lot of this, but to do the rebate, these are the requirements. These are the base requirements. You can look on the website. They're going to do a, Samantha, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's a pre-installation check before you can remove your current lawn. Samantha,
Yes.
I'm gonna let you answer that for me real quick.
Yeah, that's correct. So you would submit an application kind of just outlining what kind of project you're interested in doing, and then they will contact you to set up a time to have one of their inspectors come out, and they'll just take a look at your current landscape and let you know what you might qualify for, and then they'll just verify any measurements.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so one of the requirements for the rebate is to apply for it before you start doing anything. So one of the things that we also want to make sure we're doing is protecting the inlet of our garden. So this picture shows a bunch of cobbles at the top. So this rain garden has mulch for its top layer rather than cobbles. So it has mulch there. So it does use large cobbles to protect where the water comes in, to slow that water down so it doesn't wash out the mulch at the inlet. This picture just shows, your pipe running across the grass. Generally you might want to bury a pipe, dig it out, but you can also use like a gutter extension on the top, or I've seen people use the gutter bags that like are green plastic that flows out to extend their downspout that 10 feet to the garden. So your water is going to come down into the garden, either piped into the garden or brought in over the top. I usually bury a pipe and bring it from my downspout underground into the garden, kind of right at that height of where the cobbles are, so about 3 inches below the top of my garden, and it's going to be protected. You have to have a ponding depth of at least 6 inches. So that is from the very top of your rain garden, whether you have your garden indented or if it looks like it's level, like that picture we looked at with the 200-gallon rain barrel, the cobbles count as part of that ponding depth, but the dirt that's underneath the cobbles do not. So you need to have at least 6 inches of that cobble depth. So your full depth would be 12 to 24 inches for the rain garden. The requirement for rebate is that you use native plants. Bosqua has an approved plant list, which we're going to email out as a follow-up email later this week for all of you guys. Their website, their plant list is truly all-encompassing. It's a wonderful resource. When you open it up, you can open it up in Excel and then go over to the rain garden tab and click on that to sort by plants that are acceptable for the rain garden. And some of the plants that I've used that I've had really good luck with are here. Just taking a look at the plants that you're using and really considering where you're placing them in the rain garden is important, though. Not all plants that are acceptable for a rain garden are going to like being flooded out during that temporary ponding. So things like California poppy, bee plant, blue-eyed grass, they don't mind being a little bit wet, but they really don't like the flooding. So putting them kind of on the outside of the swale or up on the berm of the swale is on the berm on the outside of the swale is going to give them a better chance at survival. Some plants like yarrow or Douglas iris absolutely don't care either way, so you'll have a good effect with either. So when you pick out the plants that you like from that plant list, you can go on the plant list and then you can go to Google and see what these plants look like if you're not familiar with them. And then you can also search, how well they do really dry or really wet to see where you want to place them. So for the rebate, you do need to use all native plants inside your rain garden. So what a lot of people ask me about is, can I put, there we go. Can I put fruits and vegetables in my rain garden? And the short answer is no. We're only putting native plants in that rain garden. But if you love planting your own veggies and you really want to raise your own veggies, you can plant them just outside the rain garden on the berm. I'm not sure what just happened there. I'm sorry.
No worries. Are you able to share again? Or did you lose permission?
There we go. Did that come back?
I do. Oh, okay. I can see it now. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. My whole screen just went dead on me.
Oh.
Okay. So you can put edible plants on the outside of the rain garden on the berm, but you do still want to think about what you're watering with your rainwater. So you really want to avoid those leafy greens like celery and lettuce. You want to avoid anything that grows on the ground or that you're going to be eating the root of the vegetable. Anything like a citrus plant, something bushy or vining, or really tall herbs, veggies like rosemary and artichoke, those are going to be fine because you're going to be drip irrigating, or your rainwater is going to be coming in and it's going to be flooding the roots, but it's not going to get up and actually cover over the part of the plant that you're eating. So you do want to just, keep in mind and think about, the stuff that we get on our roofs of our houses that is some pretty awful chemicals from wildfires, forest fires in this area, where, they end up with cars and houses and all sorts of chemicals in the ash. And some years like 2020, where we had really, really bad levels of ash on our roofs, just you don't want to be ingesting that. So even though it's not in your rain garden, it's on your berm, just think about what you're planting there and try to put things that are not going to pull those pollutants up through their system. So let's talk a little bit about maintenance. So I recommend using drip irrigation. It's very efficient, and because our system has either those cobbles or that mulch on it to help the moisture stay in the ground, the drip irrigation is going to last a little bit longer and really help your plants. Especially when your plants are getting established, you're going to want to water them a little bit more. With native plants, once they're established, they'll need very little watering in the summer. As with any garden, weed it as needed. Check them, remove weeds as needed. With a rain garden, your mulch on your berm should be 2 to 3 inches thick. If you choose to use mulch in the swale instead of the cobbles, it needs to be at least 3 inches thick. Mulch, it's biodegradable, so it's going to break down. It's going to add nutrients into your soil, but it's going to break down, and you're going to need to keep replacing it. So you will need to keep an eye on that and replace it. Things like microbark are a little bit lighter weight. They tend to float away. So hardwood mulch has a longer effect and works a little bit better with rain gardens. If you get erosion, you should repair them, try to stabilize them, use splash blocks or cobbles below the downspout. And, just keep an eye so that that lower berm doesn't get blown out. You want to avoid synthetic fertilizers or herbicides because they're water pollutants, and we're trying to get our water cleaner. We're trying to, really clean that water as it's filtering into our soil. If your rain garden ponds for more than 3 days, something's not right. So your rain garden should be designed so that it's not going to pond for more than 3 days. If it's doing that consistently, then it was either built too shallow or too small, and you need to extend it. If extended periods of flooding will kill most of the plants, and you may get mosquitoes breeding or other pests. So we really want to avoid that. If it's ponding for a whole week, but it's been raining every day that week, that's acceptable. If there's a ton of water coming in, what we're talking about is, it rained on Monday, my garden is still filled with water on Friday, something's going on, you may need to make your garden a little bit bigger or a little bit deeper. So hopefully your first time you build it big enough to be able to accommodate all that water based on that soil test. So we do have some extra information here at the end. These are some websites that can be super helpful for resources as well as for the rebates. And then I'm going to just take some questions now, and I can go back to any of the slides. I know it seems like I went pretty fast, but we want to make sure we left time for the Q&A at the end, so I can go back to any of those slides and clarify any questions you guys may have. Samantha, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll because it keeps popping up over my screen, if that's okay.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry about that. I can end that. Sorry.
Okay, so we have a question here. Someone wants to make a rain garden in their front yard, but they want to use the water from the roof gutter at the backyard. So to take the water from the gutter to the rain garden, do they want to use, they're asking if they should use drainage tubing that is perforated or solid tubing. So I guess it really depends. You don't want to use perforated tubing right next to your foundation because that's gonna flood your foundation and you're gonna get flooding. So generally I always recommend trying to use whatever downspout you have closest to the garden you're installing so that you don't have to transport the water so far. If you don't have any downspouts in the front of the house and you don't have any room for the garden in the back of the house, one of the great ways to bring that water is by installing a rain barrel in between them. So your water from your downspout will fill the rain barrel, and then you can run a solid overflow tubing from the rain barrel into the rain garden. And that the rain barrel can kind of act like a bridge between your downspout and your rain garden. This is a pretty specific question, so I'm not sure if that was helpful. Feel free to ask a clarification if I didn't answer it well enough. So we're going to go back to the anatomy of a rain garden slide for this question. So this question is, our backyard is basically flat. We have to dig a channel a few inches deep to move water from near the house to the rain garden area. So should the 9 to 12 inches of the rain garden be measured from the depth of the channel we had to dig? So if you're moving the water from your house, I generally bury a pipe 3 inches down. So the top of the pipe would be 3 inches down. And this safely gets the water away from the house without creating a trip hazard or anything where you would no longer be able to walk right next to your house, between your house and the garden. If you want to just dig a channel to let that water flow in, then yes, the 12 inches would be from where the start of the rain garden is. So from the height at the start of the rain garden, not from the height of your house. So I think the better picture for that might be here. So when I'm measuring the ponding depth, I am measuring this is, oops. Sorry, let me clear my ink marks. So this is the height where, I can't draw a straight line. So essentially that is, if we imagine that was a level line and this hill goes up to it, that would be my level. And where the water starts at my garden here, that is the height I'm looking at. So I'm not worried about the height here at the house. But if you're pretty much level, they might be the same. But what we're looking at is the height of the garden itself, so that this depth is our minimum of 12 inches. So hopefully that answered that one. If the rain garden facilitates more water penetrating the soil, how is it that it can help? So it's going to keep the building foundation drier because you're pulling the water away from the foundation. So if you just had your downspout open like this, all that water is going to rush out. You're going to get erosion right here, and you're going to end up with the water coming into the ground here and going into the ground right next to your house. This pulls the water 10 feet away, and then it helps the water flow in. But you also are adding all these plants that are going to help drink the water, and then the water is going to come in to the soil when the soil is able to accept it. So you are already 10 feet farther away from the house as the water goes in. Generally, you're going to be a little downhill from the house. Water is going to continue to want to flow downhill. So it's going to continue to move farther away from the house. Hopefully that helps. There was a clarification on the previous question. They said they don't have a downspout, so they need a channel. Do you have a rain chain or something else, or does your roof not have a gutter on it? Samantha, you can answer this. I think there may be a requirement for the rebate that it is attached to a gutter system, but I don't have that on the slide.
Yes, I believe with at least Valley Waters, they ask that you send a picture of the downspout that you would be diverting from. I'm not too sure about with Bosca's rebate. The requirements might be a little bit different.
Okay. Yeah, I do think you need to have a gutter. You can connect to a rain chain with a channel. Oh, your downspout goes underground, so you have a French drain. So if your downspout goes underground, there's two options. I've done a couple installations lately where houses, locations thought that they had a French drain. A French drain is water that is piped down underground, and then it daylights. It goes into a perforated pipe to infiltrate the soil, and then it usually daylights about 5 feet from the property line downhill, where it can kind of percolate back up. They thought they had a French drain. It turned out that their downspout was improperly installed, and it was just going into the ground to nowhere and was just flooding their foundation. So it may be worth, if you aren't sure if it's a French drain or where your French drain's running to, it might be worth just digging around that downspout and seeing if it actually ends, a couple inches or 6 or 10 inches underground, in which case you could cut it off and redirect it and turn it into the garden. The other option is if you do have a French drain with a perforated pipe, you can figure out where that's daylighting and connect your rain garden to that. So there are ways to connect to an existing system.
Bill added more clarification, and then I think Grant raised their hand, and then Molly
Okay,
submitted a
let me
question.
just take a look at this one situation. Downspout goes into, so this is, it's not a French drain. The downspout goes into a series of pipes that come and then comes out in the swale on the other side of the sidewalk in front. So from what I'm reading, this sounds like, I mean, that is what we would consider a French drain if it's going underground and then coming out into a swale. If it's not coming out on your property, if it's coming out on city property, those systems are kind of grandfathered in. They're no longer installed. If that swale is on your property, you can turn that swale into a rain garden. So there are definitely options for connecting into the existing pipe or just running your own from it, or diverting part of the water. You can get a rain barrel diverter that you just drill a small hole and it will divert part of the water from your downspout that you could run a pipe from. So there are definitely options for that situation to run the water into a rain garden. We had a raised hand. Would you like to unmute?
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It's been really helpful. This might be a really a specific question to our situation. I don't know, but just from the diagram that you're showing here right now, the section that's labeled A is actually, in our situation, hardscape. And so we're wondering, we've had some issues with probably damp soil around the foundation, and we were thinking of rain garden as a potential solution for helping to keep this, the soil a little bit drier around the foundation. But if it's hardscape in between the house and the rain garden anyway, I'm not sure if the rain garden is going to help with drying it out, since the water is currently flowing over the hardscape.
So I guess my question is, does your downspout go directly onto the hardscape, or is there an area around your house that's not hardscape where the downspout is draining onto?
It goes onto the hardscape.
Okay. There you could add plastic tubing to run it over the hardscape. Excuse me. And do it for the first couple of storms this year, just to test and see if that moisture issue you're having is actually from your downspout and just water coming through the cracks in your sidewalk, in your paved area. So you can I think they're like $5 or $10 at Home Depot. You can get the plastic sleeves that you can just zip tie to the end of with the little gasket. And that would just be a really good test just to see if that's what the issue is. You know, there may be another issue that's causing it. And if that is the issue, then you can figure out a way to get that water diverted, you know, into a rain garden to bring it further away from the house.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So I have a question here referring to running the water from the back of the house to a garden in the front of the house. It says, when using drainage tubing with no hole, should I bury the tubing 3 inches deep? But do I need to use gravel below and above the tubing? It is good to have, you know, the gravel, especially below the tubing, and something to support the tubing so that it's not going to, depending on what tubing you use, if you're using a solid pipe, or a flexible pipe, you don't want to be able to kink that tube. So I would look at the manufacturer's recommendation for whatever tubing you buy. It's going to be different depending on what type of tubing you're using. I always say a minimum of 3 inches of dirt on top of whatever tubing to help when you're walking, that you're not going to hurt the tube. And that's a minimum, but look at the manufacturer's recommendation for whatever you choose to purchase.
I'm gonna drop some links in the chat for some of the rebates that were mentioned today, and then a couple of other helpful resources. And then again, in a couple of days when the recording is ready, I'll go ahead and send up a follow-up email with all of these links included as well. And we do have another raised hand from Bill, so I will allow you to speak.
Thank you. And thank you for your earlier answer. So in this house they do have swales that were put in by the developer. They're like 15 feet wide between the street and the sidewalk, and all of the downspouts from all the gutters go out into that area. So it basically does make a rain garden out there, and that was the whole purpose. Where should trees go in that scenario? Street trees?
So generally you wouldn't want to plant trees in a swale that's going to flood regularly.
Right.
And I'm guessing if all the houses are going into this swale, you probably have noticed some flooding in that swale during the rainy season.
It does. It ponds in our area in front of our house, and we see it's all connected to each other. We see some ponding that maybe lasts for half a day, even during the worst of the rainstorm, because it's such a wide area. But I guess, the city put their trees in right again, up on the berms, but again, basically directly next to the sidewalk and next to the street. So now you have the other problem. They lift the sidewalk and they hang over the street.
Yeah. So the reasoning they probably didn't put them in the center of the swale is because they were worried about the flooding, and you don't want to get root rot from too much moisture around them. So they were probably trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
And this does sound like a little bit more of a complicated situation.
Yeah, you can't win either way, basically. You either run one problem or the other. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that if you have the space to do a rain garden on your own property that you wanted to do, you might be able to do a partial diversion so that some of the water goes into your rain garden and some of it still goes into that original swale.
We were just dealing with an area close to the house that was sort of in last year's rain was pond. Basically, we discovered we had a low spot near the house on its own, and so we were trying to basically channeling it away from the house and basically created at least our own little deeper hole to get the water away from the house, and then maybe make that into a rain garden this year.
Absolutely. And how far away from the house was this problem spot?
Oh, almost directly next to it.
Okay. So yeah, I would say in that case, digging a little channel to bring that water into a rain garden would definitely work. You can line that channel with drainage rock. and actually get it, up to ground level, so you're not creating, a stepping hazard if it's right next to your house.
Okay, yeah.
So you could create like a drainage rock channel, essentially, just filled with drainage rock, so the water is going to have an easy route to take, because that drainage rock is going to be a lot easier for it to move through than the soil that's in shock, and then use that drainage rock to bring it into a full-on rain garden a little bit farther away from the house.
Okay, thank you.
Samantha, thanks for putting all those great resources in the chat.
Yeah, of course. And again, I'll compile all of these and send them to our attendees through email as well.
Great. Well, we'll take a couple more minutes to see if we have any more questions. Or if you guys want me to put one of the slides back up to look at again. I know we went through some of the slides a little bit quickly. Or if you have questions about gray water or rain barrels, I'm happy to answer those as well at this point.
Go ahead and
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I know you touched on this briefly, but would you mind just kind of reminding me here how rain barrels can be used in conjunction with a rain garden as part of a solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So this picture shows a rain barrel kind of in the back left, that big green tank. And one of the great ways that you can use a rain barrel with a rain garden is if you run your downspout into the rain garden. Oh, sorry, let me try that again. You run your downspout into the rain barrel, and then you run the rain barrel overflow into the garden. So that way you're holding out however many gallons of water your rain barrel system is for future use. But any overflow from that goes in and immediately ponds and fills your rain garden. And then what you can do is you can run a drip irrigation system from your rain barrel set on a timer to drip irrigate your rain garden in between storm events and during the dry season. So then in this case, the 205-gallon tank will be full during a rainstorm, and the overflow will water the garden. And then once that overflow is soaked into the ground and the garden's dried, it will time drip irrigate the rain garden. And so that rain barrel kind of works in conjunction with the rain garden that way, both during the storm as well as during the dry season.
Right. Okay, thank you. Can I ask you one more question while I'm unmuted here?
Absolutely.
I'm just curious, I hear these two terms and I'm not quite sure what the difference is between a rain garden and a bioswale.
Oh, that's a great question. So a bioswale is generally a depressed area of ground where water can also temporarily pond, but it doesn't have the same level of engineering as a rain garden. So it's kind of like the rain garden's, younger sister that hasn't fully developed, to its full potential. So it still can do the ponding. It's still going to help soak it in, but it does need to be depressed in the ground. Whereas a rain garden, as you can see from this picture here, this garden on the left has a 6-inch ponding depth, but it's level with the ground. So it does not look like a swale at all. But we actually dug down about 22 inches. So this has the capacity to hold a whole lot of water without showing. So it's a little bit more engineered.
I see. Okay, thank you.
And you may get different answers from someone else if you ask that same question.
Oh, okay.
I think a lot of terms are still developing a little bit.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I would consider this more of a bioswale. I mean, it is supposed to be a rain garden, but I don't think it was installed at a full 12 inches. So I think this is a little bit more of a bioswale in these pictures. Which is also why it has more significant ponding than a rain garden would. Okay, well, Samantha, did you have anything else you wanted to share with folks?
No, like I said, I would be sharing all resources in a follow-up email. I will include the link to this recording if you want to go back and review what we covered today. And then I'll also include the link to some of the upcoming classes if there's any other topics that we kind of touched up on here that you might want to learn more about. We do have other webinars that will probably go over those as well. So yeah, if there are no other questions, we can end here, and we'll send out that email. If you have any questions that come up between now and then, you can reach out to me, and then I can put you in contact with Chris or send you some resources that might answer your questions.
Yeah, and Samantha, I think my email is part of that resource packet. So
Yeah.
folks, if you do have questions, feel free to send questions, or if it's, very specific to your house, you can attach a photo. That gives me a little bit of a better idea and a little bit less guesswork in trying to answer. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there are no other questions. We can end here. I'd like to thank you, Chris, for teaching this class tonight. A lot of great information, and I'm sure you provided a lot of help to our attendees today.
And thank you all for attending.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.